Hi students, this is Mrs. Mignell, and I'm going to go over the chapter and asking the right questions on what are the reasons. It depends on which version or edition you have of the book for the chapter. Chapter 12 is chapter 3, or edition 12 is chapter 3, and edition 11 is chapter 4. So just make sure you have the right title. What are the reasons? So the learning objectives of the chapter are for you to recognize some things. So you're going to be taking a look mostly at conclusion, reasons, and evidence. And you really need to be able to understand the difference of them. So the first thing that the chapter wants you to be able to recognize is the role of reasons and evidence in an argument. It's really important that you just don't look for a person's conclusion, but after you get their conclusion, you take a look at whether that conclusion is supported and how well it's supported. The chapter also wants you to be able to understand the characteristics of an argument, which you will be writing and which you'll be reading an awful lot of. And then you need to be able to determine what's the difference between reasons and conclusions. So those are the goals of the chapter. So reasons and evidence. So here's an example. And this comes from the book. So what's missing from the following claims? So the debt imposed on college students translates into huge profits for the banks that lend money to them. A centipede sting is more dangerous than the bite of most snakes. Music has more power to change the world than if possessed by the combined effect of all political leaders. What's missing? The reasons with the evidence. So these are conclusions. So this is a message that the author wants the reader to believe after having read the article, but at this point there's nothing stated that actually supports that conclusion. So just to review, what is a conclusion? And you should be able to turn this off and take a look at it and be able to say this without looking, that the conclusion is the message the author is trying to convince his or her audience to believe. And if you need to, pause the tape here and just repeat this a number of times, because every time you hear conclusion associated with Browne and Keeley, you should know that this is the definition. And then, what are reasons? Okay, so the book defines them as beliefs, metaphors, and then other statements offered to support or justify the conclusion. So they are the beliefs that make us believe things, okay? And sometimes we pose them in metaphors. So you're going to be taking a look at an author's reasoning for their conclusion. And then evidence. So what is evidence? So it is the additional support that is composed of facts that is persuasive enough to convince the reader to believe the conclusion. All right, so now your reading job, when you read articles for academia, is to find the author's conclusion, to articulate their reasons for that conclusion, and to see if they have supplied sufficient evidence for the reasons backing their conclusion. Now, just before we go on, I want to introduce this concept of Bloom's taxonomy. It is in your syllabus. And Bloom created this triangle that represents higher and lower order thinking skills. So on the bottom of the triangle, we have remember, understand, and apply. So these are the lower order thinking skills, and traditionally you should have learned them between grade school and post-secondary or secondary school, junior high and high school. So you should be able to read something and understand it, remember what's said, and then be able to take that information and apply it. And that's pretty basic. When we come to higher order thinking skills, we're actually asking you to analyze, which means to pull apart the components. So analysis here would consist of pulling apart what is the author's conclusion, what are their reasoning, and how do they evidence it. That would be part of analysis. And then you would evaluate, okay, in order to create your own ideas in a paper or assessment. Okay, so remember Bloom's taxonomy, it's important. We're going to go talk about this matter of evidence, right? So remember that it's this additional is the facts that supply the basis for people to believe the reasons. And if there isn't evidence, then you should really question the author's conclusion. So for example, and this comes from the book also, the conclusion is China will soon overtake the United States as the dominant country in the world. So that could be an article that someone has written, and that is what they want the reader to believe. So you would say, what is their, so author, what makes you think this? That should be your response when you're reading an article. What makes you think so? And if they only say, because I believe it's true, that is insufficient. You would want something that basically went into this matter of because of their military, they have increased their military, and because they're spending so much on education, which is true. I don't have those statistics, but you would take a look to see actually if they had backup of statistics on how much they're spending on their military compared to the United States, and how much they're spending on education compared to the United States. I do know there is a little video that says, do you know? And one of them says that China has more honor students than the U.S. has students. So they are definitely ahead of us in education. So the question here that came up here is, what do you as a reader do? Remember now, your job is to evaluate higher order thinking skills. So this matter of pulling apart, saying what is the conclusion, what is the author's reasoning, and how do they evidence that their reasons. So you're analyzing, and now you're going to evaluate the evidence to determine whether to accept the author's conclusion. And if an author has poor and weak evidence, then you should be very skeptical. Okay. So you're going to be giving it a thumbs up, or this matter of, whoops, I went the wrong way. So thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay. So here's a little practice. All right. So here's a conclusion. You should buy rather than rent a home. All right. And I've taken it actually from an article that I'm going to show you in a minute. And of course, you as a reader should be asking the author as you're reading, what makes the author think so? What makes you think so? So I've taken this article. An awful lot of my college students like to bring up these articles that have 5 reasons to do this, or 10 reasons to do this, or 7 top reasons to do this. And if you do bring up that, you really need to be critically thinking about how have they evidenced their reasoning to support their conclusion. So here is the article. I'm going to show it to you. Pull it over here and take a look at the article here. So it comes from a general trade magazine called The Balance. And if you take a look at The Balance, it's written by people in the industry for people who are in business. It's not an academic journal. It's more aimed at general people running a store. So here is her article, and this is by Miriam Caldwell, and she was, if you take a look at her credentials, it talks about what she's done. So freelance writer, her work has appeared in Go Banking Rates and blissfullydomestic.com, and she's appeared on BBC Radio, and it talks about her experience. So for this level of a magazine aimed at her general population of business people, I would find her acceptably an acceptable expert. Okay, so I wouldn't put her in an academic, a highly academic article. Now she gives you five reasons not to. I'm going to focus on her 5 reasons to buy to buy the house. Okay, 5 reasons you should buy the house. So I'm just showing you. I've given you her title. You can go to it on your own. Her first reason is you feel ready. Her second reason is to build equity. Her third reason is this matter of being secure in your job. The fourth reason is this matter of a tax break, and her fifth reason is this matter of stability. So now I'm going to come back to the PowerPoint here that I came up with, and I've actually listed these reasons here, okay, so that you can see them. And this is part of analysis. This is what you would do. You would identify her conclusion, which is you should buy a house. That's part of her conclusion, okay? And then you're going to take a look at her reasons, and this one she made it easy. But then you're going to come back and you say, does she actually evidence her reasons? So in this particular one, you're going to take a look at the evidence, and now you have to evaluate. So you're going to have to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So her first reason to buy a house is you feel ready. Go back and read that particular section of her article, and pretty much it is you base her evidence is your feelings. So nowhere did she bring up a study that talked about people who bought houses who felt that they were ready were more successful than people who really didn't feel that they were ready. So I'm not too sure how reliable feelings are. So I personally would give this a thumbs down. Okay. So this matter of building equity. And the first thing that she talks about is that you throw money away when you're renting. And I have heard that. And I guess I could probably be I could argue that, well, you need to rent somewhere. Okay, so she's not saying either buy a house or be homeless. All right, so I guess it's okay, right? I'm kind of like marginal on that reason, on that evidence. And then she says selling a home leaves money to purchase another home. Well, I've had friends who have sold their home at a loss and have had to make up that payment. So I would like to see some statistics on the people who have sold their house and have earned money. And it would, of course, depend on what era the house is, whether they bought it for too much because it was a seller's market, or if they purchased it during a buyer's market. So an awful lot needs to be unpacked in this. I would give this particular one a thumbs down because it's not always true. So are you secure in your job? So she says, oh, you will stay in your current job. And I would have liked something about that most people's contracts, at least in California, are at will. So even if you think that you're going to stay in your job, your employer at any moment can let go of you. So you kind of have to temper this with what kind of job do you have? Is your job disappearing? What jobs are more secure than others? And even this matter, are you doing okay at your job? The evidence here, owning a home makes you stick to a budget. I'm not too sure about that. I know an awful lot of people who are paying off their credit cards rather than paying their mortgage, and that's why they're losing their jobs. So I would question that. There was no statistics that actually say or prove that. It prevents you from throwing money away on rent, and that comes back up to this matter of this equity. So a tax break. Now, it's true, you do get a tax break on a certain percentage of the interest that you pay into your house. It is 2018, and people are now filing their, it is the tax year for filing for 2018, and taxes have changed. So I would have liked some kind of indication about how much of the percentage of interest on a house will be allowable during these new tax changes, and she did not provide that. And then owning a house makes you more stable. And I guess I know I would have liked some studies that said that people who do buy the house are more likely to remain. And what exactly what does stable mean? You keep your job, you stay in your neighborhood, you stay in your state, you pay your state taxes. Okay. So actually, I'm going to run out of time on this one. I'm only doing 15 and 15, so this is actually going to be the first part of this